Hi and welcome to Hihu, where we take a look back at landmark games and see how they hold up to current industry trends and standards. In this video, we'll be looking at a game that coined the term but can it run Crysis, a future-set first-person shooter with the infamous nanosuit. The game isn't exactly that old, it's around 9 years, but for a game that had such a name for itself around its graphics, let's see how it holds up today. Like anything a few years later, there are some flaws, and most flaws you can kind of put aside and you can shove them under the rug. But some of the flaws here were pretty annoying. Not game breaking by any means, just annoying. But let's start off with the game itself. Starting off, you will briefly introduce your team, who is essentially your cookie-cut stereotypes from any military movie or game. One guy is called Psycho, your leader is called Prophet, and you play as a character called Nomad. And as you can tell, it's not exactly that imaginative. If the characters or dialogue were a little bit more aware of itself and played upon it, it would have been fine. But the overall story, including the banter, is just fairly boring, and it tries a little bit too hard to be serious. Even when Halo was your standard military shooter, it still was rather interesting, and the interaction between Cortana made it that way. Alternatively, Bulletstorm, that came out in 2011, was a fun game with some cookie-cut characters, and whilst the game wasn't perfect, the story and characters were all pretty two-dimensional, but at least they knew it and had some fun with it. You could take Spec Ops: The Line as well, that had pretty boring military characters at the start, but by the end, they were completely different people. There are just so many options that they could have gone down, but all the characters maintain their cookie-cut status throughout the entire game in Crysis. Now, the story here is as simple as some North Korean forces have taken over an island and also kidnapped some American archaeologists. You and your team are outfitted with the nanosuit, and in the first mission you're introduced to the mechanics of the suit. It takes a little bit of time to get used to, or at least it did for me. There's an ability which activates the suit's strength, which lets you jump really high and punch down buildings. There's speed, in which yes, you can run across the battlefields very quickly. There's a shield, and then there's finally a stealth cloak, which turns you invisible. As you use an ability, it depletes the suit's battery, and all you have to do is wait a short amount of time before it regenerates, and then you can use abilities again. As with any game, if I have the ability or option to play stealthy, I will. So when the game opened up after the tutorial and I had to get from A to B, I was purely using stealth and ignoring every other ability. But I soon learnt that you couldn't exactly play this game like that. Stealth is a slow and tactical approach, but due to the AI not being the best and being very aggressive, I soon learnt that the game is meant to be played by combining all aspects of the suit, which is a really neat concept by design. You would quickly run across a patrol whilst traveling to your destination, turn invisible, and pop in and out of stealth while knocking off enemies one by one. Or you could just run by them all very quickly and pop into stealth at the end. It really gave the suit a sense of power and gave the combat a very sandboxy feel. And whilst I originally wanted to play stealthy, it gave an entirely different feel to what being stealthy is normally like in games. And for that, this game still holds up pretty well in terms of standing out of the crowd in 2016. The gameplay shifted from what I thought was going to be a slow and tactical shooter to a fast-paced action shooter, which is fine. It kind of reminded me of Serious Sam in a way. The AI in those games aren't exactly that smart, they just run and shoot at you, or sometimes enemies explode. But the thing about those games is that there is a form of challenge in regards to the amount of enemies you are facing versus the enemy variety. In Crysis now, there's only really one enemy type until the last chapter of the game. You pretty much just fight Korean forces, some in vehicles but mostly out of, some have nanosuits as well, but really you're just fighting the one person over and over again. You can sometimes be fighting many at once, but the suit gives you so much power you can take them out so quickly, and a variety would have been nice because things started to become boring very quickly. If you take Serious Sam as my example, you might have 50 guys running at you at once, or even in Bulletstorm the enemies are rather similar to Serious Sam. But the thing that makes those games different is that you have to be smart about who you take out at a set time. Some enemies explode when in range, some shoot big missiles, and some can be very quick. It's all rather tactical. And whilst in Crysis, I felt like I just had a playground in which I could just mow down the same enemy type very quickly. It was never challenging. The only time that I felt like it was challenging was at the start, which is when I went to play stealthy and didn't realize that the game wanted me to use all the abilities at once. In regards to the AI, I don't even know where to start. It's kind of disappointing. They sold this game as being a beast to run back in 2007, yet when you were able to run it, you realize that they spent all their money on graphics and not on AI. It's rather insulting how dumb the enemies actually are too. They usually allow themselves to be cannon fodder, walking in front of themselves, being mowed down, friendly fire. They might form a straight line and allow themselves to be dropped off one by one. It's very stupid. It's essentially like playing Serious Sam minus the challenge of variety. Another thing I found with the enemy AI is the fact that they're incredibly aggressive. I could be 2 kilometers away or even further from a tank, and sometimes the cunts inside can spot me being prone in some bushes with 90% accuracy. It made being prone or crouch incredibly pointless, like absolutely redundant. But besides the fact that they are very stupid and incredibly aggressive with amazing eyesight and amazing aim, the game is still really damn fun. I just want to get that across. The enemies are stupid, sure, and I wish there was more of a variety, but I was just having so much fun with the nanosuit. Body armor will always exist in video games, always. It's just what they do with it which is what makes it interesting, as armor, something you wear, acts as a mechanic. From ripping out guts of someone as you play as a Big Daddy in Bioshock, to having armor act as a user interface for the player in Dead Space, indicating Isaac's health levels. You could even say it about the dress the protagonist wears in Journey with their magical scarf. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that what they did with the nanosuit was really neat. It's not something that you necessarily see, it's something that you definitely feel whilst playing as Nomad, and for that I think this game has a really solid mechanic when it comes to the nanosuit. As you progress, the game has a pretty nifty segment in an alien cave, and I found this to be the best and most frustrating parts about the game. On one side of the coin, I spent the better half of the game on this tropical island fighting idiots. Next minute, I'm floating in zero gravity in this alien spaceship thing. All of a sudden, it turned the game from a first-person shooter into kind of like a walking simulator. It reminded me of the cave segment in Dear Esther, which came out a year later in 2008. Luckily for Crysis though, this was actually interesting. Sorry, I love walking simulators, but I really dislike Dear Esther and the pretentious wank that comes with it. Give me Stanley Parable, give me Gone Home any day, but fuck Dear Esther. Anyway, whilst enjoying the caves, things started to take a turn for the worse, and the game starts to add these aliens that you need to fight, but it didn't really add anything aside from being an obstacle. Signposting in the cave is horrible. There is no sense of up, down, left and right, which is kind of cool when you're in zero gravity, but there was no indication of where I needed to go. I got lost so many times and I ended up on Google as to where to progress. Eventually I found out, and I'm still not 100% sure on this, but you had to kill all the enemies in the room to progress, which is fine, but nothing told me I had to. Up until this point, I could have completed objectives by not killing anyone if I wanted to, and I had. So the game really left me in the dark there. I should say though, it's not that big of a deal, and it was a really welcome change of pace of the game. It's when you come out of the cave, you start fighting aliens instead of the Korean forces, and it's a bit of fun, and the game winds up fairly quickly after that. I just want to reiterate this, I've been bitching for a few minutes, but all of these complaints about how the game is aged and compared to other games after all these years, that's the purpose of this review. I'm not talking about this game exclusively, like I am, but I'm comparing it to other games and hopefully modern ones. The game is still fun, and I can see why it was successful in 2007, even without the graphics taken into account. But I can imagine a lot of people didn't have a decent PC to run this back at launch, and for a few years after release, it was still outstanding. But the graphics has worn off, and the faults have come to surface even more than ever. The game costs around $20, and I can say it isn't worth it at that price. I bought it at discount, and I can recommend it at discount. If you want a sandbox experience with a fun suit and some really terrible AI as cannon fodder, this is your game. But if you want a game with a challenge, try Serious Sam or Bulletstorm. But if you want a similar shooter, try Far Cry 3, 4, or maybe even Halo. This is Shawnee Maurice from Hihu. Thanks for watching.